Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Mark Poliger, and welcome to the Authors at Google program. And today we have with us photographer Michael Clark. He's an action and sports shooter. And I came across him first during my days at Adobe, working with some of the digital imaging teams there. And he sort of came to my attention and started working with some of the product teams there, shooting example photographs and talking about sort of technique and workflow using the products. And over the years, I sort of kept track of him. He's been teaching workshops, doing a lot of advertising, shooting, and some of his own personal work. And I thought that given the extreme interest here at Google in the photography community, in sort of not only the substance of the pictures, but also the interest in how they are captured, particularly for some of the more challenging shoots like Michael does, that he would be a great speaker to come here and talk to us about his work and his techniques. So with that, Michael Clark.
Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Michael Clark. Thank you to Mark for bringing me out. And thank you to all of you for coming out to see me today, give this talk. And above and beyond that, thank you for all the work you guys do here, because you guys get me about half of my work these days. Through my website, I've had several assignments, some of which I'll show the work from that came to me because I had my, search engine optimization done for adventure photography, and people found me on Google. And somehow, luckily, I show up in the top 1 or 2 for adventure photography in most categories. And thank you. Your work goes far beyond just the stuff you guys do here. So that's awesome. And actually, the book that I have also came to me through you guys. The the editor, actually, at the publisher, was doing searches on adventure photographers, and he's actually seen my work in climbing magazines years and years ago. But he basically looked at 30, 40, 50 adventure photographers and their work and trying to figure out who he should pitch the book to first. And he looked at my website and found me through Google. And because of the number of images that I had in various different sports, chose me as the guy to go through, and also because of my newsletter, which goes out 4 times a year, which is basically like a little PDF magazine. He decided to pitch it to me first, and I accepted it. So that's how the book came to fruition. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. But the book is Digital Masters Adventure Photography, capturing the world of outdoor sports. And it's been out since, I think, just after Thanksgiving. But again, thanks for having me out here. It's a beautiful campus you guys have here. Sounds like a fun place to work. So, about me. I did not study photography. I studied to be a physicist and worked for about a year after I went to school at UT Austin. I specialized in solid state physics, so I actually kind of worked on the technology for CCD chips before it really started being used in digital cameras in mass. And then in grad school, I basically started rock climbing. And there while I was taking grad school courses, started rock climbing, and that got me into the outdoors, and I was totally obsessed. It's kind of like surfing. Once you start, that's all you want to do. So I schemed my way into a 2-year-long set of travels, quit my job, and headed off with my camera in tow, just because I knew we were going to be going to all these crazy, cool places. And through that process of those 2 years, I decided to try photography. And that's kind of how I got into this. And I haven't really looked back. I've been a pro photographer for 14 years now, mostly specializing in adventure sports. When I started out, it was mostly rock climbing. And I'll just let you know the colors on that screen are better than this screen, more accurate at least. But we did calibrate the monitors, or the LCD projectors. So I've been all over the world shooting rock climbing. For the first 4 years or so, that was pretty much all I shot was rock climbing, because that was my one main passion. And the other reason being that I could make a living of sorts, not a great living, but just shooting rock climbing, because there weren't that many rock climbing photographers in the world. Basically because the skills you need to shoot rock climbing, to get above the climbers, you needed the climbing skills and the photography skills to put it all together. And there's not that many people in the world, or at least there weren't at that point, that were willing to work that hard to do that stuff. This is a shot that's in Mexico, in a place called Potrero Chico. and we're 600 feet off the deck. It took about 5 hours to get in position for this shot, but it's been used by a bunch of companies like Black Diamond, who makes climbing gear and stuff like that. And after the 4 years or so, this is actually an article that Nikon World put up in their magazine about me and my work. It's just showing a usage of that picture. And this is actually, well, yeah, going back, this is me at work. This is that same wall, actually, where that last picture was taken, the one of the woman here. I'm photographing her husband on a route just next to it. And it took us all day to get up there. I'm carrying a lot of camera gear, as you can see, way more than I would now, because I've got some huge lens there, 80 to 200, and a bag full of other stuff. And that's mostly because we were on the wall so long. And I'm hanging from a static line that we fixed before he started climbing, so that I didn't have to climb, because I can't really climb and photograph. So I'm hanging from these mechanical ascenders where you slide them up and they don't pull down, so I can totally let go and manipulate the camera. And I just go up the rope with them, and I've got these little things called etriers. They're little webbing ladders, so I can kind of do this funky motion and ascend the fixed line, even if I'm hanging in space and not even touching the wall. So this is a casual day out there shooting rock climbing. I wear the knee pads too, just because the knee pads help preserve clothing. And I've learned that over the years. And then you can lean into the wall really close and not have to worry about scraping yourself up. But it's a lot of work shooting rock climbing. It's definitely an incredible amount of work. This is an article that came out in Outdoor Photographer like 8 or 9 years ago. But it's just a good example of what it's like for some of my shoots. So, and this is also one of the coolest assignments I've ever done. This was an assignment in Mallorca, Spain, for Men's Journal magazine. This is all just kind of a little background for you guys before we start talking about specifics on the images and how I made them. This is a climber named Chris Sharma, who's probably the strongest climber in the world these days. Super great guy. This is a kind of relatively new sport called deep water soloing. And it started here in Mallorca, Spain. Well, actually, it started in England 30 years ago, but nobody really got into it because it was a little nutty back then in the cold waters of off England's coast. But in Spain, the water's a little warmer. We do this in late summer, early fall. And basically, they climb above the ocean with no ropes. And nobody had ever been there. A friend of mine, Tony Lamprecht, was one of the guys who found this climbing on Mallorca and called me up and said, "Hey, Mike, we got to go do something here because this is just crazy and it's beautiful." And it's like the Blue Lagoon. The water is crystal clear, even though it looks black in this image. That's the film. But on this route, it had been raining for 5 of the 10 days we were there. And I was kind of freaking out because the magazine wanted a double-page spread. And this is the double-page spread that they actually used. And I knew this was the perfect spot. And so one morning, the sun came up, and I asked Chris to go out there. And we went out there, and he hung off this hold for like 30 minutes, 3 times in a row. This is the biggest hold on the climb, you know, and he could, it's like wrap your hand over this thing. He could hang off this thing all day if he had to. Every other hold on the climb is like super tiny micro climb or hold. So we did this little, pose down shoot that ended up being their double page spread. And there's also, this is another climb that we shot there where they actually fell into the water. He's 70 feet above the water. And granted, there's also like 10-foot waves rolling in underneath him. So at this point, I'm like 5 feet away from him. I'm shouting, and he can't even hear me because it's so deafening with the waves crashing against the water. So in this shot, the thing he has to do is he's holding on to these 2 holds, which he can barely hold on to. And this wall is also overhanging by about 30 degrees. And he has to jump 5 feet. There's a big hold up at the top there you can see. It's so foreshortened because I'm straight above him, but it's an all-points release where you basically kick off, everything goes, and you've got to reach for that hold. He didn't make it. He took a 70-footer, and I've got a whole series of pictures with his dreads flying around, and his facial expressions are priceless, actually. His eyeballs, I saw him up top, because he can go around on an easier route and climb back to the top. His eyeballs looked like he'd just gotten out of some massive car accident. He was kind of freaking out, but it was beautiful. And here's Chris Sharma doing the same route. He fell the first time, but he made it the second time. And it's one of the super classic routes in that area. It's an ad for Prana, which is down the way here in California. They make climbing clothing and yoga clothing. So rock climbing is definitely in my blood since I started out as a rock climber, and it's still one of my big passions. But I needed to expand my horizons a bit and shoot something besides just rock climbing. So I started shooting mountain biking, and this is an image I shot for Adobe, actually, when I was shooting for Adobe Lightroom when they came out 4 or 5 years ago. This is in Moab, and he is jumping off this. It's like a 35-foot drop, and yes, he does land here, and it is rock, so there's no room for error. And this is a pretty casual drop for these guys. This is not a big deal. He did it 8 or 9 times. We had 3 riders doing this thing for a couple hours. I photographed this same rider, Ryan Reed, great guy, doing 50 to 60-foot drops. And there's some riders who've done close to 100. So I don't think anybody's actually landed 100. I think the biggest one is 60 or 70 they've landed. I also started shooting whitewater kayaking, which is a great sport to shoot because it's crazy. Everything's moving fast. It's actually a really good test for cameras autofocus because everything's random all over the place. There's no linear lines that these guys are taking because they're being pushed everywhere. And then I also started shooting surfing, actually just a few years ago. This is a pipeline off the north shore of Oahu. And interesting story with this is that I started shooting surfing because of this book. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I travel 6 to 7 months out of the year. I'm not really traveling for surfing because I don't live anywhere near an ocean. But for the book, we needed some surfing pictures, and I ended up calling a guy named Brian Bielman, who's like the godfather of surf photography, great photographer. He's been doing it for 25, 30 years on the North Shore and all over the world. And he invited me out to shoot big wave surfing. And I basically had a tutorial from one of the best surfing photographers in the world. And he's a really good friend now. That's a great honor to be able to do that through the book. This is from shore. I have yet to swim in the ocean. There's definitely some other pictures in the show from just a couple months ago, the Eddie Aikau, when they had the biggest waves roll through in the last 40 years, which I'll show those later. But using like a 500 or 600 millimeter lens, huge lenses. And I also shoot some lifestyle stuff, images that are kind of, the in-between moments or less extreme, one could say. They sell a lot better, actually, in some respects. Backpacking, a lot of landscape stuff as well. This was shot just above Santa Fe. It's called the Suki Basin. Late afternoon one day, just getting out of the office, went up there and shot some pictures and ended up being one of the best landscape pictures I've ever taken, probably. This is Canyonlands in Utah. Landscape pictures don't sell so much, but they're fun to take, and they definitely fill in the details of the moment and where you're at. Another lifestyle shot of mountain biking. This one's on the Wasatch Crest near Salt Lake City. Beautiful trail, super casual. And then also, here's another lifestyle shot with yoga. Most of my work is commercial or editorial, so I'm shooting for magazines or I'm shooting for corporate clients like, Nikon and Nike, Adobe, whoever else, Patagonia. And some of my work is stock, so I shoot for a stock agency like Getty Images or somebody like that. And this was shot for stock, though it ended up being used by Patagonia. Just went out with a yoga instructor to White Sands, New Mexico. And the story behind this image is we got really lucky with the weather. And the clouds, obviously. Little did we know, this was shot the night we got there. We showed up late afternoon, shot for 2 hours, and then we're going to sleep and then shoot in the morning at sunrise was the plan. Well, little did we know these clouds were bringing in some massive dust storm. And we didn't sleep a wink that night. It was like a whiteout with white snow, gypsum. It was crazy. We had sand caked in our eyes everywhere. And it was kind of a horrific night. But the models were good to go the next morning. Even though nobody slept and it was miserable, they got up and kept working for us, so that was great. I also do a little bit of portraiture now. And this is my friend Nico Denon. He's a French freediver, and he'd just gotten out of the water at this point, diving 100 feet, I think, to the bottom of this freshwater hole to the very bottom, and held his breath for about 5 or 6 minutes. And we did these portraits in the men's bathroom entranceway. For me, I don't have a studio, so I improvise wherever I go, and I take lights with me. And I took a 4-foot white background, and it was kind of windy that day. And this is in New Mexico. You don't think of there being that much water in New Mexico, so the only place I could find out of the wind to set up the background and the lights was in the entranceway of the men's bathroom, which was only like 6 by 10 feet. So we just stacked ourselves in there, and I told him as soon as they get out, come on over. And he still had water dripping off his face. I do a lot of these black and white on white portraits these days just because they're really intense and interesting. And also, I tend to shoot just my own personal work, whatever kind of grabs me. This shot was taken at the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta, which is the world's largest balloon fiesta. In the world, there's like thousands of balloons taking off every day. And I'd seen a shot somewhat like this with some figures on the outside of the balloon. And I thought, that's a cool idea. I want to see if I can do something with that or replicate it. And so I basically looked over the balloon grounds, because there were 600 or 700 balloons filling up at that point, and saw a bright one, because I knew I wanted really bright colors. And just walked over to the guy, started befriending him, and then said, hey, can I get in your balloon and just shoot some pictures from the inside, hoping that something would happen. And I was just about to ask him if he could send a few people around, because all the people have to do is really kind of stand right next to the balloon. And before I could even open my mouth, part of his crew had gone over there, and they're pushing the sides of the balloon up because it helps it fill up with air faster and kind of poof it out. And I saw that and just started snapping away. I couldn't believe my luck. And it's definitely one of my best pictures, I think, because it speaks on a lot more levels than just a ballooning or people or whatever. I'll go more into that here a little bit later. One of the assignments I had recently, just last fall, was with Red Bull and this guy, Danny McCaskill, who's one of the superstars of YouTube. This guy went from working in a bike store to 2 weeks later being a full-time sponsored athlete with Red Bull and all kinds of people, getting filmed for a Volkswagen commercial. He's a Scottish guy. He's 22, 23. He's been riding his bike all his life, and he does these crazy tricks, and I'm sure many of you have seen his video riding the fence posts and doing all kinds of wild stuff. And so Red Bull called me out to shoot him, and we landed in San Diego, and we went out scouting to find stuff for him to do, and we saw these rings by the airport, and he's like, oh, yeah, I can do a backflip off this thing, no problem. So the next day, this is at the end of the day, we went and shot this, and it took him 5 or 6 tries to get it on, because as you can tell, it's not flat. He had to set up a little bag. He has to hop onto this thing. Super technical just to do that. I was really impressed he could pull that off. And cops rolled by. We'd been chased by the cops all day on the shoot, so a cop rolled by and just smiled at us and gave us the thumbs up. We were like, all right, we were ready to run at that point. But anyway, the point of this picture, I like this picture a lot. This is one of my favorite pictures from the shoot. But this is the one that has a lot more impact. And for you photographers, the note here is get close. I think Robert Capa, famous photographer from D-Day, said, if your pictures aren't good enough, then you're not close enough. And definitely one of my mottos is get in close with a wide-angle lens. This is a fisheye lens. And I'm pretty much laying on the ground. I mean, the tip of my camera is like right here on the ring, pointing up, and it sees everything in the plane of the camera, so I don't really have to worry about focus or any of that. I just compose the image, and bam, I just got to wait for the timing. And exactly. Well, he fell like 6 or 7 times, which those were pretty good pictures too, but no, because he was going the opposite way, so he'd come in from this side, go up, and then come down, which was great. I mean, he did it probably 10 times for the camera, and at that point, we thought, okay, the light's not that bad. We don't want him to get hurt. So we'll just move on to the next thing. Here's another shot from that day. And I was telling the story earlier over lunch, but this is him on an aircraft carrier, the USS Midway in San Diego Harbor. And the story behind this is that we got on the ship. We only had an hour. And as soon as we got on the ship and told him what we wanted to do, the guy was like, no. you can't do anything. Because I was like, it'd be great if we can get them to, do a flip off the wing of one of the planes on the aircraft carrier. And that was immediately axed. That was just like, no. That's going to injure the plane. So, we were doing all kinds of, just have them sit on the deck, nothing all that exciting down on the deck. And we look up and we see these two boxes up here. And Danny's like, hey, how can I just go up there and stand on one of those boxes with my bike? And so the guy from the museum's like, sure, okay, that won't be that big of a deal. And I'm sitting, I'm 60 feet below on the deck here shooting up because I wanted a clean background with I think I was shooting with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And so he goes up there, and the director goes up there, the director of the museum, and me and the art director from Red Bull are standing down there. And he stands up on the box, and then, the guys are like, okay, you're up on the box, and then Danny just pops a wheelie. And there's a 60-foot, this box is only like 3 or 4 feet wide, and there's a 60-foot drop right in front of him. And Danny's just looking over at the director saying, I'm more comfortable on my bike than I am on my own 2 feet. And then immediately he pops to the other box. So he started on this one and then popped to this one. And then, just kind of did these little up and down movements and then popped back and then jumped off the back of the box onto this deck. And the guy was standing right here. And he didn't really say anything to that. He was like, okay. And then as soon as the art director from Red Bull saw this, he was like, oh, he needs a Red Bull t-shirt or something because we couldn't see the branding, which was perfect because it was so complicated to get up here. The director had to go down to help her find her way up. And in lieu of that, that's when Danny just went nuts and started doing all kinds of tricks off the stuff that nobody could see except for me and him. And this is one of the pictures. And then the director came back, they put on a t-shirt, and he just did some quick little things. They were quickly escorted off the ship after this. So and there's some of the other exciting things that I photograph. This was a shot I did with the Henry the Henry 1 Search and Rescue team up in Santa Rosa, California. These guys are unbelievable. One of the best search and rescue teams in the United States, if not the world. They do ocean rescues, cliff rescues, and this was an assignment for Men's Fitness magazine where basically for 3 days I flew with these guys and I hung like 100 feet off the helicopter flying over the ocean. I got to, do cliff rescues with them where I was hanging underneath the person they were rescuing. All kinds of stuff like that. There's a whole series of pictures on my website about this. So I get to have a lot of fun on some assignments. Some assignments are quite a bit more miserable than this, but we'll show those here in a bit. Now for photo enthusiasts, we'll just talk about the gear real quick. This is a composite shot I did for the book. That's like a 2-page spread in the book, and everything's labeled so you can tell what it is. This is kind of my complete kit, except for the fact that there's no lighting equipment in here, except for the small strobes. All of this doesn't go anywhere with me. I don't own a 600. I rent a 600 when I do surfing photography because it's a really expensive lens. I wouldn't use that often. So, I'm using mostly digital cameras these days. I have Nikon equipment. I've been using it for 20 years, so I just stick with what I know. I still shoot with Hasselblad every once in a while. I still like film. But everything becomes digital these days at some point, so it's just easier to shoot it digitally and not have to worry about scanning the film unless I'm going for a certain look. This is generally how I carry my gear in a big backpack, at least for the cameras themselves. I'll have a lighting kit going, which I'll show you that here in just a second. This bag pretty much goes to the point where I'm going, and then I end up breaking it down into smaller bags where I can actually carry them. So this would be what I would take on a rock climbing shoot. It's like a small top loader bag that I can either wear on my chest or around my waist, and maybe 1 or 2 lenses. And for most of my stuff, I carry multiple cameras, but I've got so much other stuff like climbing gear or outdoor gear to keep me safe and not, freezing to death that I can't carry too much camera gear. This would be a skiing setup. I would wear that chest on my pouch, or that pouch on my chest. That would be hard. And 1 or 2 lenses. And for mountain biking, I would take this. I have like a whole plethora of bags. I'm the Imelda Marcos of bags. I have 20 or 30 of these different things, depending on the sport. This would be like the backpacking setup. So just whatever works. This is my sea kayaking setup, because I use one of these underwater housings just to keep my cameras from getting destroyed. And this is my adventure racing setup. And I use the smaller pro cameras so I can take the grip on and off, which the grip allows me to have like a faster frame rate and longer battery life. So if I need 8 frames a second, then I'll put the grip on. If I don't, like for adventure racing, I take it off, and then I have 5 frames a second on this camera. This is just some miscellaneous climbing gear I would take. This is a very light amount of climbing gear. And if you're shooting surfing from the water, this would probably be the setup you're using. These are SPL housings. They're not fully waterproof that far down. They only go to about 25, 30 feet, but you're not really diving with these guys. So it's got to be light so you can actually thrust it out of the water at the last second when you're getting nailed by a huge wave. So lighting stuff. I do a lot of artificial lighting with my images just because I want to set myself apart from the rest of the pack out there shooting these days. And it takes a lot more work. It slows down the process, and it really complicates things massively. But the results can be spectacular. So I have battery-powered stuff. I have Chrome Rangers, which this is probably a 20-pound setup with one head and the battery and a few light modifiers. I also use these little quadras that they just came out with, where this is like a 7 or 8 pound setup, 400 watt seconds. The Ranger before the other slide, this one's 1100 watt seconds, so this is more pop if I need more power. 400 here. And the little strobes that come with your camera, they're only like 100 watt seconds, so these are quite a bit more powerful than those guys, even though they're not, and they're a lot heavier as well. Then I use all kinds of light modifiers with them just to soften the light or shape it and mold it how I want it to look. The other thing are these cases. I have Pelican cases that I take my stuff all over the place because I'm usually standing on a beach or somewhere and it might be raining, and just to protect the equipment, which when you get on an airplane with 3 or 4 of these, they look at you with a little strange look like, how much? Okay, pull out your wallet. So, but the results can be quite different than your average shot. This shot has 2 strobes going at it with grid spots, which are like little honeycomb foil things that go over the strobe and direct the light, kind of like, not like a laser, but like a spotlight to some degree, a diffused spotlight. And this is a cave, a crystal cave in New Mexico. It was 98 degrees this day in August. And this is Timmy Fairfield. He's a world-class climber. This is a really hard climbing route, 513, for those of you who know climbing nomenclature. And he could barely even hold on to the holds, but he actually did the route. We're not posing here. He's climbing the route. I just made him climb that part of the lip 3 or 4 times so that I could get the shot. And this shot specifically, I thought about this shot. I'd been to the location. I'd scouted it. I knew exactly what I would need. I knew the route we wanted to get on. I kind of had it pretty much sketched out in my mind before we got there. And then we got there, and I hauled 200 pounds worth of lighting gear up to this cave to make it happen. So this is, when I was going for this one shot, that was the whole day. It wasn't like just going out there and grabbing a few shots. 200 pounds of lighting gear. And this is one of those portraits I did for that men's fitness article with the Henry One guys up in Santa Rosa. And this is a different shoot than the rock climbing shot in that we basically had 30 minutes to set this up, get the shot, and get out of there. Because I was working with the sunset in the background, and there was only a space of 25 to 30 minutes that would be there. And then those guys, I'd been shooting with them all day, and they were done, I could tell. So I didn't want to run them into the ground here with the last little portrait shoot. But I think they were pretty psyched when they saw the picture. So there's a bunch of strobes going off in this point, in this shot. There's 2 strobes laying on the ground with red gels on them, which gives that red look to the, canopy and everything. There's the HUD display inside, the heads-up display, which has got these green lights that's kind of casting on them, on their jackets especially. And then I had little strobes pointing straight at their face. And at one point, I couldn't really get the pilot on the left's face to really show up, so I just handed him a headlamp and told him to hold the headlamp at his face. So there's a lot of problem solving, super fast. We had to get this thing done, and this is like one of the last shots I got before we just stopped, and it worked out pretty well. And sometimes you have no gear, no lighting equipment, and you have a headlamp. And this was shot in Torres del Paine in southern Chile at 4 in the morning. I didn't have a tripod, so I just put the camera on a rock, and we took 50 shots while she stood there and walked around. With really minimal gear, you can get some pretty amazing results if you're just willing to work it. Here's another shot that if you first saw this, you may just think it's the end of the day sunlight. And that's what I was trying to mimic here. I just put the light where the sun would be if it's still up, and blast them from the side with it's got a little light orange gel on the picture on the strobe. And this isn't that big of a jump. It's just maybe 12, 15 feet, even though it looks really short from the angle I'm at. And I just had them do it 5 or 6 times to get the right body position, and the timing had to be key too, because you only get one shot with the strobes. So you can't blast off like 8 frames a second and pick the one you want. Here it's just one shot, so you kind of have to nail the timing. That's why it's great to work with pro athletes, because they can do the same thing over and over and over, and they can put their body position perfectly in alignment with where they were before. Or you can tell them, oh, do this, and then they can change how they're doing their trick. Some things aren't super crazy, just, I do a bunch of this pan blur stuff as well, where it's slow shutter speeds on the camera, and then a strobe filling in, and you get these ghosting features. And basically I'm running with the camera and have an assistant running with the strobe, and you just click off, a shot every few seconds as the strobe recycles. And then, I think I probably shot 100 pictures just to get this one picture, and you look at all the pictures like, oh, this is crazy. I remember I did this on the Adobe shoot. We did a whole bunch of, there should be a picture of her doing that, and the art director was just sitting there like, what are we doing? And then I showed him a few of the pictures, like, keep doing that. So it's kind of experimental but fun. This is another more technically executed version of that, where the camera's stationary this time, and the flash is too, and you just have her ride by, and you just catch it at the right moment. And if you look close, she's actually ghosted just a little bit, but she's sharp enough because the flash is sharpening the person. The flash is actually stopping the motion, not the camera, because the camera sent to 1/10 of a second, and the duration of the flash is creating a sharp static image of her in the frame. This is one of those pictures from the Adobe assignment, and my assistant was running with a full strobe setup. It probably weighed 15 pounds in sandals through the bushes off the trail. Luckily she was okay, but we did that like 250 times. Here's another shot with just a headlamp. I was in Canyonlands. I had one camera, one lens with me, my D700, and at 24-70, I taped it to a tree. I didn't have a tripod, which it would have been nice to have had a tripod, but and then I just walked out here. It's like a 30-second exposure, and clicked on my headlamp, shined it into the tent a little bit, and then kept walking out of the frame. And then the camera was just open to fill in the stars behind it and everything else. And this is another one I shot for Adobe. This is just he's just popping over like a 5-foot ledge. I'm actually tucked underneath this ledge as tight as I can, because he's coming down like 3 or 4 inches away from my face. And then the strobe is being fired from above the lip of this little cave. He landed on my feet at one point, which was not so much fun, but worked out for a good shot. And here are strobes kind of, just to mimic another climber who's below this person. I saw this happen where the other climber looked up as she was coiling her rope on top of this little boulder, and it lit her up and kind of separated her from the sky. So I mimicked that action by just putting a strobe there to make it brighter, because this strobe wasn't that bright. So out in the field, you use all the tricks you can to get the pictures to make them look the way it feels while you're out there, like especially the mountain biking stuff. Sometimes if you just take a straight picture, it doesn't feel as big as that 20 or 30 foot cliff felt when you look at it, the awe of those guys doing what they do. So I use a lot of fisheye effects like this image, where this is only 6 or 7 feet tall, but just getting underneath there and close in is a great little effect. Rock climbing, one of the challenges is showing how steep it looks and giving that feeling to the person. Generally, that means being above the climber, which really helps out. It's a lot more work because you have to get above the climber, but sometimes you can shoot from the side. Kayaking, it's the autofocus, setting up your camera, blasting away as much as you can. Kayaking, things are moving so fast, it's hard just to keep the person in the frame. if you're tight, and you want to be semi-close. If you're not that tight, then it's just going to be a little dot on a river. So that can be a major challenge. To overcome that, usually what I do with my cameras, and I think the Canon cameras are the same, they have like a whole field of focus points, and I'll choose where I want the person to be in the, if I want to be in the lower right or the lower left or wherever I want them to be in the composition, I'll just put the point there and I'll plant that on their head as they move. And so that's how I can control the composition as they move through the frame. And I can see if it's working on the back of my camera since we're shooting digitally these days, so that's kind of nice. Mountain biking. We'll do some questions at the end here. Mountain biking is kind of the similar thing as well. You just kind of put your point where you want them to be in focus, and especially this trip, this is like a little BMX jump, which he did like 10 or 12 times, so I can kind of perfect a shot. In every time I keep shooting, I'll get at one frame, okay, that's not really working, let's try this, or let's try something different. And sometimes mountain biking, you just got to show the pure speed, but with like a big dust trail or something like that. This is up in Silverton, and he's doing like, 40, 50 miles an hour coming down this downhill track, just flying. And this is a guy, I can't remember his name, but he's these guys hiked to the top of a 14 or 13,000 foot cliff across from Silverton. No trails, talus slope, got on their bikes, downhill bikes, rode straight down the mountain. The talus, you can actually see, this is a big chunk of rock about the size of his head coming down after him. They rode straight down here, went out into this grassy valley, straight down this valley, out into here. There were like maybe 12 to 15 foot wide streams with cliffs next to them, and they just jump straight off the cliff over the stream down, no trails anywhere. These guys are amazing. This is also the guy who jumped off the 100-foot cliff. He broke his back. Actually, the doctor put into, I think it was fiberglass rods into his back on either side of his spine, and the doctor told him that his spine was stronger than it was before. Bad news. Because he still does this stuff, and he walks around with a cane. Great guy, but they're doing some pretty amazing stuff. There's another great picture or story with this picture. He's doing about 90 miles an hour right here. This would be much better in video, but the still frames, basically, he dropped into a bowl above this and is arcing up on this wall, and there's a cave underneath him right here, which you can't see in the shade, and this is the top of the arc. And he comes down. This little boulder right here shows like the 1.5 place where the transition is smooth. Everywhere else, the transition is kind of not smooth. So if he hits there, he's going to fly straight off the front of the bike and die probably because he'll hit his head, impacting. So, and he's not doing 90 here, but he's doing 90 when he gets there. And then he goes up onto that thing and then comes back. He found this place and was the first guy to do this little wall ride. And one of my other biking friends who had shot a lot saw this. He's like, no way, I'm not doing that. That's totally nuts. So we did this 5 times. The 5th time, he nearly stalled here and would have fallen 80 feet, and we stopped. So a big part of my job is managing risks with the athletes as well to some degree, or at least trying to talk them out of stuff. I actually did talk that guy out of something else that would have been really crazy. Here's another one of the pan blur images. Sometimes the conditions aren't so great. This is in Alaska, up in the Ruth Glacier. I spent a month up there, saw the sun maybe 3 days. Didn't really do anything but sit in the tent. I read the Brothers Karamazov. It was good. Okay, and I'm going to skip along through a bunch of different images here real quick. Sometimes the details are the best thing. Also, the lifestyle stuff kind of shows the background. This is a shot going into Indian Creek, which, it's not that unbelievable a shot, but it's just driving in at the end of the day after a long day of climbing. The balloon fiesta again. Some of the mountain bikers surfing. I'll quickly show some of these images from the Ediacaw. It's rare in a professional's life or any photographer's life that things line up so perfectly. I planned this trip a month in advance and had no clue if there would be waves or not when I got to the North Shore of Hawaii. 2 days after I was there were warnings going off that the biggest waves in 40 years were going to hit the islands. And they were warning everybody to evacuate the coastline because they thought houses would get ripped off the shore. which a few of them were damaged, but nothing got ripped off, luckily. But as it turned out, they had the biggest big wave surfing contest that's ever been held. And they had 50 to 60-foot waves. This is Sonny Gonzalez under a 50-foot wave at Waimea Bay. The interesting thing is they were basically free-falling off the top of the waves. So you would, and this isn't even that big of a wave, this is only 40 feet for these guys. So you'd free fall like 15 or 20 feet before you even touch the wave face. And that was pretty amazing. These guys, I mean, this is the who's who of surfing. You got the Andy Irons, Bruce Irons, Kelly Slater, everybody's there, that's the whole crew. And this is Greg Long who won it. He caught like 350 or 60-foot waves right at the end of the day. This is another Panblur from Pipeline, actually. This is just up the beach. So, but projects. This project came to me. It's the Wenger Patagonian Expedition Race. Came to me through Google, through you guys. They looked for adventure photographers. They just typed in adventure photographers, and my name came up number 2 or 3. And the number 1 and 2 guys were there at the event shooting with me. They picked the top 3. And it's one of the longest, hardest races in the world, up there with the Tour de France, I would say, and the Iditarod and a few of those guys. It is an adventure race. So basically there's hiking, there's sea kayaking, there's climbing on ropes, not like climbing, rock climbing. And there's also mountain biking, which is on roads down there because there's no single track. And there's also dragging your boats over islands too, if you really enjoy suffering. So it's one of those sufferfest races where I haven't seen human beings willingly put themselves through this much pain ever. These guys could go climb Everest 3 times back to back and not even sneeze, I have a feeling. They're superhuman. 600 miles in 10 days, no trails, except for the roads for the mountain biking, and no maps. In fact, actually the maps are Google Earth maps. That's all they had, which were incredibly detailed, but you know, that's pretty amazing when you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're talking 300 or 400 miles from anywhere. And I'll just quickly tell this story. This is last year, 2009, when I was shooting the race. I was with those guys in the trekking section, a couple of the teams, and we ended up on this fishing boat in the Magellan Straits. And we got on this boat, me and another photographer and one of the writers, and we'd been backpacking for 3 days. It'd been raining sideways the entire time. We were over it. We were done. And we were about to go hypothermic when this boat pulled into the bay, and we asked if we could stay on their boat for a couple hours while the race organizers sent us a boat. What ended up happening is we were on the boat for a day and a half because the boat never showed up from the race. But it was one of the coolest things that's ever happened in my career because as soon as we got on the boat, we realized these guys were a National Geographic moment. They were so interesting. They were fishermen that fished for this stuff called luga, which is like red algae on the bottom of the ocean. So this is the father, and he worked with his son, and he would be under the water for 15 hours every day, breathing through a garden hose. Just a garden hose, not with the end chopped off, attached to a generator on the boat, which would stop every once in a while. And for lunch the next day, he asked us if we wanted fresh king crab and sea urchins. We were like, yeah, for sure. So he dove over the side, got some sea urchins, came back with a bag full of like 50 of them. We cracked them open, eating sea urchins on the boat with a little lemon juice. It was phenomenal. And then he went back over and got this just giant king crab, which we ate, and it'll never get any better than that for me, so I'll never have king crab again. And this is just one of the portraits I got of him as he came up. And then Nikon World did an article on the whole story. But and then portraits, I've shot a lot of portraits just because for magazines you need to be able to tell different parts of the story. Most of my portraits have something to do with the outdoor world in some respect. And digital workflow. I shot a big deal for Adobe 3 or 4 years ago with Mark and those guys, the crew there. And through that, I wrote a book on basically my entire digital workflow, which is available on my website. It's not really a published book. It's a PDF ebook, but just shows my entire workflow from the camera all the way through to when I deliver the images to the client. Very interesting little book. A lot of people love it. Check it out on the website if you want it. The other thing I have, and this is free stuff, this was a marketing deal I started 10 years ago or more, which gets me many jobs, including the one I got with Mark here at Adobe. And it's basically a magazine. It's a PDF document, anywhere from 15 to 20 pages. And it includes gear reviews. It has articles about my latest assignments. Here's one about the expedition race last year. It talks about all the gear I use. It has little digital tips for photo editors. It's something I send to photo editors, and there's got like 5,000 people, I think, now that sign up for it and get it whenever I get around to writing it 4 times a year. It includes some of that stuff, the images, special portfolios, and stuff you can take home for yourself. I mean, you guys are out there shooting. What can you learn from an adventure photographer? If you haven't figured it out already, preparation and planning. Like if you're using strobes, you got to really think about that stuff and figure out how you're going to integrate that into your shoot. Improvising and problem solving are always good skills in here at Google. I'm sure you guys are great at that stuff. Transferring it to your camera, and that stuff is just a matter of knowing your camera. Also, don't forget about the details. Like, look for those things that aren't apparent at first, like the people's hands, their feet, their expressions. Look for what they're doing and really get in close. I mean, you're probably shooting your friends, or they will soon become your friends if you're shooting adventure type stuff. And try and get in close and just crop things out so you can show what's going on without showing the entire scene. And then also I'd say master, I mean, I'm guessing you're all shooting digital for the most part. Master your digital workflow, because it's kind of sad to see a great image kind of not be worked up perfectly, or not have a color calibrated monitor or this or that or whatever, so that doesn't kind of make it all the way down the pipe to where it could be. Also helps if you're obsessed and you work crazy hard, which I'm sure you guys have no problem with those. Come early, stay late. You know, after everybody started leaving, that's usually when the good stuff starts happening, or before everybody's gotten there. And set yourself up for success is the one big thing I would say. There's a National Geographic photographer who used to say, it was Jim Richardson, if your images aren't that good, put something more exciting in front of the camera. So it's pretty, well, you can tell from my work, I go by that philosophy. I just find the craziest thing going on, and I can take pictures of it. It's not that hard to get a good picture. But that'll definitely help. And by setting yourself up for success, I mean go out when the light is good. Go out, you know, when you've got a good composition set up because you've scouted it out or something like that, so that you know you can get a good picture. If you're just going out kind of on a hope and a prayer, it's going to be hard to get some decent pictures. So a little forethought and planning. Anyway. Thanks again for having me out. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be here with you guys. Any questions?
So we have clear out up here too. So if you have any questions, say please, we have a mic over here, or if you just want to shout them and we can repeat them up here. With a little bit of time, make them good questions.
Anyone?
Mm-hmm. How do you balance between kind of actually setting up a certain shot versus just trying to be there and capture what happens?
So the question is, how do you set up a rock climbing shot? And
or
basically,
just like the balance between setting up a specific composition versus just capturing what happens. Like, how do you balance that?
How do you balance specific action and capturing what happens? It's always a little both is the answer, I guess, because you're setting up for one route is basically what you're setting up for. And then whatever, I mean, it's not like I'm shooting just one section of that route. I'm going to shoot the entire length of that climb. And I may not even know what the best picture is from that route if I've never seen it climbed before. So what'll happen is I'll just work my way up with the climber, and I'm pulling the rope up behind me so that it's not in the picture. And if I find a section that looks really interesting from my angle, which is usually a body position or something like that, then I'll just have them climb that like 5 or 6 times. And then we'll move up. I mean, the sad fact is most rock climbing photography is posed, because there's no other way to do it hardly unless you're shooting from the ground or somewhere else, or unless you're a phenomenal climber can climb as fast as the climber is climbing with camera gear. So does that answer your question? Okay. Sir?
What is your working relationship with your models, with the climbers and such? Does somebody hire you for a shoot and then you hire the climbers, or does somebody else do the whole thing? Or
It's a good question. Mostly with climbing, they're all my friends that I've known for years, and either like say the North Face would call me and they want me to go out with a certain crew of people who I already know, or the climbers are going somewhere and then I pitch the story to a magazine or somebody. So it kind of goes back and forth both ways between the sponsor, the climbers, me, all talking at the same time. And sometimes I don't know the climbers at all, but I get introduced through other climbers and say, oh, you should go talk to this guy. He's a great climber. You'll get some great images of him. So it's just kind of random all over. Any other questions?
Have you ever been in a situation like, for example, you were on the boat for like a day and a half and you didn't expect to be there? Did you ever run out of batteries or laptop issues or?
I've nearly died a few times. I've nearly died a few times. The question was if I ever been in a situation where I ran out of batteries or something went wrong. The gist of the question. I've never run out of batteries. I usually come with way more batteries than I would ever need. But I have had some extremely close calls where my rope nearly got cut. Well, it was hanging from one strand of the core out of 7, 300 feet above the ground. That was pretty exciting. Yeah, I've had several. I've been hit by a falling rock. So stuff has definitely gone wrong. And I'm very lucky to be here. Knock on wood. But does that answer your question? Yeah, okay.
Hi. One problem I've had is when trying to focus on moving things with one focus point, a lot of times it falls through to the background. What do you do about that? How do you sort of keep that from happening?
Autofocus is tough. Which cameras are you using? That's
D300.
Okay, I've got that camera. It's a great camera. Talking specifically to that camera, there's dynamic focusing, which you can set up so that you have one point you choose and then it uses however many points you tell it to around that to select the focus. And using that, it usually can hold on to something pretty well. If you're using just one point as a static focus, yeah, it definitely will go to the background. There's a whole bunch of stuff, which I talk about in that little digital workflow book on how to set up my camera. And Canon is a little different. I don't know how the autofocus settings are on that camera, but there's different ways to set up the autofocus so it'll work for certain sports. And you just got to experiment because one doesn't necessarily work for the other sport. But the dynamic focusing option definitely works. And I can talk more to you about that if you want afterwards. Anybody else? And by the way, if you want to read that story about the rope getting cut, it's on my website. I was on assignment for Climbing Magazine, and I called the magazine the day after it happened because I was pretty shaken up, obviously. And they were like, we don't want a photographer to die on assignment. It's never happened yet. We don't need it to happen yet or now. So it was pretty gripping. Any other questions? Go ahead.
What are your next projects?
Next projects, well, immediately I'm going down to LA tomorrow for some book signings, but some more shoots for Red Bull. The Red Bull Rampage is this fall. I've got another few shoots for Smartwool and some other companies here coming up, and some editorial assignments. I don't have any major epic adventure coming up. I was in Patagonia twice this year, so I'm kind of taking a little rest at the moment, but just little stuff here and there. Thanks for having me out, guys.